Hello everyone, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am here to talk about book series that I have started very recently that I just cannot wait to continue with. The month of December was truly the month for me to read the first book in a bunch of series, and I'm just very excited about all of them, especially because I am still very much in a fantasy mood. I just want to read all of the fantasy and all of the fantasy romance books, which is so not the norm for me. Usually I have to really get myself in the mood to pick up a fantasy book because a lot of the time you're dealing with a lot of world building, and you know what? That takes a lot of brain power for me to fully comprehend everything that's going on. But yeah, I don't know if it's just the winter time or what, but I just want to read all of the fantasy romance. So without further ado, let's just get into these books. So first up, I have a selection of comics, manga, and manhwa. So let's do those first. I have Spy Family. This is volume 8. I read volume 7 all the way back in like April, and I just never picked up the next volume, even though we're up to like volume 10 at this point. I think one of the reasons is because volume 7 I gave 4 stars, and it was the first volume of the series that I gave less than 5 stars, and so I kind of like panicked a little bit and thought that I just don't love this series as much as I used to anymore. But it is just time. You know, I'm just missing my little spy family. We've got Twilight, Anya, Yor, and then Bond is the dog, and I forget the friend's name, but he is really funny as well. He's the one pictured on this volume. I just need to jump back into this. I also need to jump back into the anime series because I think I only watched season 1 and season 2 is now out. Next up, we have Sweat and Soap. I cannot believe I only have 2 volumes left. There are only 11 volumes in this series. On the one hand, I am not ready for this series to end, but on the other hand, I am ready for the series to end, and then I'll just get to reread the entire series at some point, you know? But this is truly the romance manga of my dreams. It's a slice of life series, which I know sounds kind of boring, but somehow this author makes everything that this couple does like the most interesting thing ever. But this series truly is everything. I cannot wait to see how it ends. I will probably cry once I finish this series, although let's face it, I cry while I read every single volume. These 2 characters just make me so emotional. But yeah, very excited to continue on for sure. Next up, I have 2 series of manhwa that I have recently discovered and started. I have to give credit where credit is due. I got these recommendations from Madison. I will link her channel down below, of course, but she is definitely the person who has gotten me into manhwa for sure. And so the first series that I started was Villains Are Destined to Die. This is a very interesting premise, but apparently this premise is very common in both manhwa and manga. But we have our main character. She is playing this video game. It's like the Duke's Super Love Project or something, like some crazy long name. And you have normal mode and hard mode. In normal mode, you are playing as the protagonist, and it is really easy to get the 5 love interests to fall in love with you. And then if you're playing in hard mode, you are playing as Penelope, the villainess, and it is nearly impossible to get the love interests to like you, and it's very easy to get killed. And so our main character finds herself waking up in the world of this game as Penelope, as the villain, and now she is trying to navigate this world and trying not to die. So it's very addictive, very entertaining. I have now read the first 2 volumes. I really enjoy all 5 love interests. One of them in particular, because he's kind of like the villain of the series, and I'm here for that. But yes, this is so good. Highly recommend. And then I have now started volume 2 of the Remarried Empress. This cover is just gorgeous. Look at that beautiful foiling on the title. This one is very different from Villains Are Destined to Die. This is about an empress and an emperor. The empress is our main character named Navir, and her husband, the emperor, is being a little shit, and he has found this woman who is like a runaway slave to be his mistress. And so she is just causing all kinds of drama. And so we eventually get to a point in the story, because we see this at the very beginning of volume 1, that the Emperor is now asking Navier for a divorce. And she consents to it. She says that's fine as long as she can remarry whoever she wants. And apparently that is a crazy thing for her to ask. So I'm just very intrigued about this story. This just is giving all of the court intrigue and drama that you could ask for. And there is a romance brewing in these first couple of volumes that I have read so far. And then last for the manga, manhwa, and comics, we have Saga. The next volume that I have to read is volume 5, and I am planning on starting this very, very, very soon. I think I'm gonna make this my first book of 2024, because last year volume 3 was my first book of 2023, and I think this is now a tradition that I have to read a volume of this to begin my reading year. This is an incredibly epic and amazing science fiction comic series that also has a very strong romantic element that I am absolutely obsessed with. The romance in this is just everything. But essentially we are dealing with a space war between a planet and a moon of that planet, and our main couple are from opposite sides of this war, and now a lot of people want this couple dead. The art style is just so cool. I can never predict the direction the story is gonna go in when I pick up a volume, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. It is just that incredible of a series. Okay, so now let's get into all of the fantasy series that I have been loving recently. First up, we have Once Upon a Broken Heart by Stephanie Garber. This is book 1 in the Once Upon a Broken Heart series. I'm actually still in the middle of this one. I'm on page 125. That's about 30% of the way through, but I can already tell that I'm really enjoying this series and the story, and I'm definitely going to want to continue. This is a trilogy. It is a YA high fantasy romance series, and we have Evangeline Fox at the very beginning of this book. She is devastated because the boy she's in love with is about to marry her stepsister, and so she goes to the wicked Prince of Hearts, who's named Jax, to make a bargain with him to stop this wedding. And so the bargain is that he will stop this wedding in exchange for 3 kisses, but not to kiss him, because if you kiss the Prince of Hearts and he's not your true love, you will die. So the bargain instead is for her to kiss any 3 men of his choosing, basically, which that's very interesting. And so things go on from there. I love the world that this takes place in. It's very whimsical, gives me slight vibes of Wonderland, like Alice in Wonderland, just because it seems like there's some nonsense going on. It's just very, very whimsical, and winter is like the perfect time of year to read this, because at least this first book is taking place in the magnificent North, which is a snowy, fantastical kingdom. And I'm really liking this. I'm very intrigued to see what happens between Evangeline and Jax. Jax is a very wicked and charismatic character, so I'm very interested to see how this first book ends and how the series as a whole plays out. Next up, we have Days of Blood and Starlight by Laini Taylor. This is book 2 in her Daughter of Smoke and Bone trilogy. There's a lot going on in this series. By the way, Laini Taylor also wrote the Strange the Dreamer duology. I read that duology a couple of years back and absolutely loved it. This series has a very, very different vibe for sure. This one is more urban fantasy, whereas Strange the Dreamer is more high fantasy. But this is about Karou, our main character here. And she is a human, maybe, maybe not. But at the very beginning of book 1, she has been basically raised by this group of chimeras, and she runs errands for this one chimera in particular, Brimstone, who is kind of her father figure. And Karou, our main character, ends up having this crazy epic romance with Akiva, who is an angel, and there is this crazy epic war that has been going on for 1,000 years that Karou and Akiva find themselves mixed up in. And the first book was just incredibly written. Like, Laini Taylor's writing is truly on another level. Like, I am just blown away anytime I read her writing. and I cannot wait to see what happens in this next book, what happens in the rest of the series. I loved the way that book 1 ended. I felt like it was the perfect ending to segue into book 2. Next up, I am back in my Shadowhunters era. I have been rereading the Mortal Instruments series and the Infernal Devices series by Cassandra Clare, and this is one of the best decisions I've had in a very long time. So in December, I reread the first 3 books in the Mortal Instruments series, which is City of Bones, City of Ashes, and City of Glass. So now I'm very excited to continue this reread with City of Fallen Angels. I really love the Mortal Instruments series. It takes place in New York in 2008, and I have really come to love this cast of characters over the years. I read both this series and the Infernal Devices back in 2018, so it's been 5 years since I read these books for the first time, so I'm just so excited to be reading these books again and to be back in this world. And then with the Infernal Devices, I am now moving on to book 2, which is Clockwork Prints. I definitely have more of an emotional attachment to the cast of characters in this series, and I also just adore the setting of London in 1878, and I truly think that Cassandra Clare's writing style lends itself to a more historical setting. And the reason why I decided to reread all these books is because I had read the first book in the Last Hours trilogy, which was Chain of Gold. This is the newest series in the Shadowhunters world. But books 2 and 3 came out in that series, and I just kept putting off picking them up, and then one day I realized that I had forgotten like everything that happened in this world. So a reread was definitely necessary, and yeah, I'm having such a great time. I love this world so much, love these characters. Next up, another fantasy series that we have is Crescent City by Sarah J. Maas. I finally reread House of Earth and Blood in December, and it was such an incredible rereading experience. Like, I don't even have the words to tell you how much I loved that book upon reread. I loved it a lot the first time that I read it, but with a series like this that is just so complex, there's so much going on, I definitely appreciated the book more upon reread. And there were some things that I had remembered about the book so that I could pick up on like some foreshadowing, so that was really cool as well. And so now I can finally dive into House of Sky and Breath, which is book 2. I have not read this book yet, guys, which is just the most insane thing. I do kind of know how this ends. I have been spoiled for like the gist of what's gonna happen at the end of this book, but I don't know the circumstances or anything like that, so I'm still really freaking excited to jump into this. Next up, we have Hero by Claire Kent. This is book 4 in her Kindled series. This is a post-apocalyptic romance series, and so it definitely has a very dark tone to it, but at the same time, there's something so oddly comforting about this world and about this series and about the romances. Claire Kent is the master of writing grumpy, stoic heroes that are so endlessly devoted to their heroines. It is just so addictive to read about. I have no idea what this book in particular is about. All it says is the happiest ending is just to survive, and I don't want to spoil myself by reading the synopsis, but just know that I am very much looking forward to continuing on with this series. Next up, we have Sapphire Flames by Ilona Andrews, book 4 in their Hidden Legacy series. So throughout the last couple of months, I have reread the first 3 books in this series, which were Burn for Me, White Hot, and Wildfire, and I absolutely loved rereading those books. So now I just need to reread the novella that connects those 3 books with these 3 books, and then I can finally dive into Sapphire Flames. We are getting Catalina and Alessandro's romance in this part of the series, and there's also going to be a crazy non-romance related plot, I am sure. This is such a cool world. It's an urban fantasy series where it takes place in Houston, but it's like a parallel universe because magic exists. And basically there's all of these houses of families that have different kinds of powers, and it's just so cool, so well written. And I'm just endlessly obsessed with the cast of characters in this series and the plots of all of the books, and I could just go on and on and on. But if you have not picked up this series yet, you are seriously missing out. All right, we have 2 series left. Next up is Zodiac Academy by Caroline Peckham and Suzanne Valenti. I just kind of on a whim picked up book 1, which is called The Awakening, and I am just so hooked. You guys have no idea. So the basic premise of this, we have Darcy and Tori, who are twins and they live in the real world, but when they're 18 years old, this dude named Professor Orion shows up at their apartment and tells them that they are actually the long lost heirs to the throne of Solaria, which is a Fey world. And so they are whisked away to Zodiac Academy, where they are to study and hone their magic so that one day they could take back the throne of Solaria. Meanwhile, there are these 4 celestial heirs, these 4 guys who are heirs to the 4 families that have been controlling the throne while Darcy and Tori have been in the human world. And so they do not want Darcy and Tori to take the throne back. And so what ensues is a lot of unhinged bullying, and it is just crazy. This series is so messy, but so fun, so entertaining. I really love the world that this takes place in. Like, there's a lot going on in terms of, like, there's elemental magic, there's the zodiac signs, there's a lot, right? But I think it's all pretty well done. The ending of book 1 was absolutely insane, and I cannot wait to see how the story continues on in this next book. Like, y'all, I am just hooked. I am hooked. No, this is not high art or high literature, but it is entertaining as hell. And last but certainly not least, we have Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross, the second and final book in the Divine Rivals duology. I read Divine Rivals earlier in December, and it easily became one of my top 10 favorite books that I read in 2023. I love this series so much because it truly combines like every genre that I adore into one story. You've got a great YA romance that is beautifully and sweepingly romantic. You've got a really great historical fiction and fantastical setting. This takes place in like a World War I type setting, and the fantastical element comes into play in that this war is being fought between 2 gods, and there are other magical elements thrown in throughout this story as well, but this just combined all of those elements so well. I adore the characters. I loved the side characters as well, and I just think that the mythology and the lore behind like these gods is so freaking interesting. So I cannot wait to see how the story concludes in this second and final book. And like, can we talk about this cover? It is just absolutely stunning. I love it so much. These are the UK covers, by the way. I got this from Waterstones, if you are curious. So that is going to be it for all the book series that I have started recently that I cannot wait to continue. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I would love it if you would leave a comment down below if you want to tell me about book series that you have been loving recently. Maybe I'll get some recommendations from you guys. I would also love it if you would leave a like and subscribe, and I thank you so much in advance if you do. And with all that being said, I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!